at Zen monasteries, there is something that's called a han, and timekeeping in Zen monasteries is based on bells and wooden objects, like hitting things and drums. And the idea is that you don't have to wear a watch. You don't have to keep time yourself. You just listen. You listen for timing. And at Tassajara Zen Center in Carmel Valley, the first Zen training monastery in the United States, this is on a big piece of wood. It's about this big, and it hangs down like a picture in the air. And the person who is waking everybody up to come to meditate hits it with this huge mallet. And you have to be careful because it swings and it could whack you in the face. So, anyway, that's what it says. Okay, so basically, wake up, you could die tomorrow. We all could die tomorrow, and wake up, we will all die. The one thing that not even money can fix. So, my talk tonight, and the last lecture, I did build around the premise of what would I say if I were going to die. What worked for me was tomorrow. It's easy for me to fall into denial about things. And so if I thought 3 months, 6 months, it didn't feel as urgent as if I were going to die tomorrow. So this quote then, I thought caught that. Don't waste time. Don't waste time. So as I was thinking about it, and thinking about it in that context, what would I say if I were going to die tomorrow? And what would I want to leave you as my legacy, or tell people sort of what was a gift to me, and then what gift could I offer to you, potentially. Of course, it's always take what you like and leave the rest. But as I thought more about it, what came up was thinking about my deathbed. So this has been really, really instructive to think about dying. What would it be like to be dying in a bed? Where would I be? What would I be dying of? So you can imagine, right, spinning out on this type of thought process. So interestingly, I have not been, this was not foreign to me. A mentor of mine, several months ago, when I was crashing once again from doing way too much, I was doing far too much, and having trouble prioritizing. I had trouble saying no. All the Unity people here, will tell you that. So I ended up crashing. And she said, well, why don't you think about where you want to be on your deathbed? And first I was like, what does she mean? You know, top of Mount Everest, you know, at a resort. And she meant my heart. What type of heart do I want to have if I were on my deathbed? What type of soul would I want to have? What kind of person would I want to have been? And so the talk is now built around that wish. Certainly it's a hope. I would not say I'm there. But what I hope to be when I die is a presence that transforms suffering. That have my very body be a presence that transforms suffering. And so the little note cards on each seat, thank you, Jeremiah, and there's pencils too. I wondered if you could take a moment to think about what that might be for you. I mean, you're young, you have your whole lives ahead of you, God willing. And so you probably won't have to think about this for a while, but maybe indulge me. Think about it. What type of person would I like to be when I die? So not about accomplishments, not about money, not about your next grade, which is urgent, of course, but just think about what type of heart do I want to have when I die. So maybe take a moment and write something if it occurs to you, otherwise just wait for the rest of us. so, and I'll have some other little activities in a moment. So, death is the one thing that we can't fix. We can't fix that. And every spiritual tradition, every religion, every perhaps thinking person has tried then to figure that out. What do you do about death? What do you do about it? And the quote here came out of a class that I taught about 5 years ago. This is a class you keep asking me about, Gus. This is the one. So it's called Mysticism in Action, Zen and Catholicism. I haven't redone it for the current core, but I want to. And in that class, students either practice zazen or centering prayer, so a Catholic form of meditation, and they study the premise that transforming violence within transforms violence without. And we actually read books by Zen masters and Theravada masters, Catholic monks, lay people about that very premise, that making peace within yourself will have an effect outside you. So this is a preliminary answer then, in part, to what do you do since you're going to die? What do I do since I'm going to die? Right? And if then, on my deathbed, I hope to be a presence that transforms suffering, what will I have done? How can I get there? So Mahagosananda passed away in 2007. He was the supreme patriarch in Theravada Buddhism in Cambodia. And he was there for the killing fields, for the terrible, terrible atrocities in Cambodia, and ended up in a refugee camp. He witnessed atrocities, and he ministered to those who had survived some of those atrocities in the killing fields. So the book that this comes from, The Gethsemane Encounter, Dialogue in the Spiritual Life by Buddhist monastics, was inspired by a meeting between Thomas Merton and the Dalai Lama. Thomas Merton is a Catholic mystic who died some time ago, but was very open to other religions, and asked the Dalai Lama to begin this dialogue. Then Thomas Merton died young, and the Dalai Lama carried it on. And this section was about how do you, as a person of faith, as a person who's spiritual or religious or who has a meditation practice, what do you do in the face of atrocities? What do you do? And so you see the quote, Isshin Nishimura, so a Japanese Zen master, had visited the Cambodian refugee camp where Mahagosananda was, and saw him still in a little hut that they had built as a temple for meditation. And notice the question, right? Isshin Nishimura says, in the middle of the dirt floor sat a lone monk in meditation. That monk I now realize was you, Mahagosananda. My question for you is a Zen question. What did you do there where there was nothing to do? So it's like death. There's nothing to be done about death. Nothing. Ultimately. Right? And Mahagosananda answered, I was seeking peace in myself, so I would have something to give the others. So this is the first piece in my talk on thinking about what it would be like to be a presence that transforms suffering. And so to offer to you maybe a toolkit, if this resonates at all, it may not, in thinking then about your deathbed wish. Who do you want to be on your deathbed? What type of heart do you want to have on your deathbed? So, now I'll talk a little bit about sort of failed ways of having done this, and then give you some tools. And certainly I'm not there. But in thinking about this talk, I started to think about other things done, not just me or the people I love or pets or so on. I started to think about the death of dreams. And what do you do when a dream that you had dies, or you cannot bring it back to life? Instead, maybe it's like dream zombie. You keep trying to resurrect it, and it turns out to be a disaster, right? So then think maybe dream zombie vampire, right? So not only is it a disaster, but it sucks the life out of you, okay? So, one of the ways that my dream became, hopefully, being a presence that transforms suffering, it came out of what I have wanted and did not get, didn't work. So, I have always wanted to change the world. I mean, I think we all share that. Santa Clara students, it's one of our, hallmarks. And there's transformation all over the map for Santa Clara, right? On the website, engaged learning, all of the stuff that we do, right? Transformation, changing the world, be the change you want to see, right? So I too in college, I wanted to change the world. I hoped I would win a Pulitzer Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize. This is embarrassing, but I'm pretending I'm dying tomorrow, so I won't see any of you again. So I can say anything I want. Tomorrow I'll regret it, but that's all right. And that I would have done something truly significant that had a big, big impact. So for example, Ibu Patel was just here, right? An amazing gentleman who started the Interfaith Youth Board. And I'm hoping eventually to incubate Interfaith Leaders in Unity. It's going to be a couple of years off when it begins. But as galvanized as I was by his visit and his vision for interfaith dialogue, for making sure that formation of youth happens from a peaceful place as opposed to an extremist place, and so on and so forth. While I watched him, I was sad, but I wanted to be him. I wanted to be doing that. Why am I not up there? That came up. That was the death of a dream. The death of a dream. So, as I then was thinking about the talk, and that was coming up, I wanted to offer that to you because part of, I think, transforming our suffering is about properly grieving for that which we will not be and that which we have not gotten that we wanted. Because without that type of grief, we won't actually see what's in front of us. So even though I felt sad and it was the death of a dream, who knows, maybe in the future, but definitely right now, I have yet to win a Nobel Peace Prize. So I think that that's not going to happen. Reality check, right? Okay. So in the midst of all of my suffering, as many of you know, I started meditating. So since 1999, I've been a Zen meditator. I'm Catholic, but I sit Satsana, and now I'm an official Zen teacher. And part of my move to meditation, or the way that I began to pursue it, was that I saw that I was suffering, and I saw that I was causing suffering, but I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't change myself. And so there was even more suffering. Think of a pattern maybe you have, and you think, why am I doing that again? Right? Like those of you in my class might remember examples I've given, like you say, I'm not going to yell at my sibling when I go home. You go home, you walk in the door, you yell at your sibling. You're flying home for Christmas, and you tell yourself, I am not going to call my ex when I get back. And you get off the plane, and you're at her or his front door. Oh, before you even go home. Right? So, why can't we change our patterns? Right? I mean, there's lots of, if only these patterns would die, right? They're the zombies, the zombie vampires, right? Sucking the life out of us. So, as I began meditating, and I'll talk more about that in detail later, and we'll do a few exercises together, what I realized was that there was change happening, not just in me, but around me. And that maybe instead of this wide-ranging social justice, big changes out of the world, which I knew I would not make, that maybe instead instead, there could be something that I call for myself. I'm sure it's not original for me. It's what I call it, social justice of the present moment. Social justice of the present moment. And that perhaps that ripples out and has an effect that you don't imagine, or that I can't imagine. And so, can we have the next slide? I think it's the next one. It is. So, my husband did the scour for me. I've never made one for him. So, it worked. So, this quote is also from Mama Gosananda. So he's passed away, but is revered in Cambodia and other sort of meditation circles around his ability to create peace and to reconcile, even with those who committed atrocities. So similar to Desmond Tutu. Right? And in his wisdom, even though he had no scientific statistics behind this, he would talk about in that same text that we saw earlier that peace ripples out, violence ripples out, and peace ripples out. And so we're circling back to, what do you do about death? What do I do about death? What do you do when there is nothing to be done? Well, the possible response that I offer to you is making peace within yourself. So, I wanted to, you won't be surprised, those who know me will not be surprised. We're going to do a little meditating. It will be very short, so those of you who are interested, don't worry. If you are, maybe you're not. So, the reason I wanted us to get a flavor of this is basically, I'm hoping that I know my bell. I do, I hear it. Is because a lot of the rest of the talk is going to be about breath-based reality and God-based reality as a way to transform your suffering, potentially. Okay. So, some of you have actually studied meditation with me, so if you want to do what you've learned, you're very welcome to do so. So Zen or centering there. But for those of you who haven't, I'll give some instruction. And first, posture is very important. Just bear with me. So if you can, feet flat on the floor. Okay. So rock them back and forth a little bit so you can feel them. Your feet can be your emergency hatch. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Wiggle around in the chair to try to loosen yourself up so you can feel your breath. And we won't do a whole lot of stretches because of time. Okay, so do some shoulder rolls so you can feel, get some looseness in there. Okay. All right. So now pull your breath into your belly. Feel it go up and down. Right, and if you've never meditated before, close your eyes. If you have meditated and you do the Zen, keeping your eyes slightly open, then do that. And perhaps what we'll try for a moment. On the in-breath, say just, and on the out-breath, say this to yourself. In-breath, just, out-breath, this. If you're super distracted, or perhaps something is upsetting, or you have a memory that arises, just go back to your feet and feel them on the floor. Rock them back and forth a bit, and then return to just this. So we'll literally do this very briefly. I just want you to get a taste of it, especially if you haven't done it before. So pull your breath into your belly, drop your shoulders, your jaw is softening, Your brow is smoothing. Your eyes are softening. All the tension of the day is leaving. It's just the sound of the fan, your breath moving up and down, your clothes against your skin. In breath, just, out breath, this. So I'll ring the bell 3 times to start and 1 time to end. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain and breathing meditation in order to set the context for talking about how these tools might work and how they might transform suffering. So I'm writing an article at the moment on evidence-based research on how Zen leads to compassion. So there's actually no evidence-based research on Zen itself, but there's a lot on mindfulness and other forms of meditation, and so I'm extrapolating because mindfulness is a part of Zen, even though it's not all of it. And in writing that article, I've been looking back at a couple of previous articles on how Zen can lead to well-being, also from studies of the brain, and especially stress, studies of stress and meditation. And then another talk on meditation that I gave at a retreat, and the name of the talk was "Why is there so much hatred?" So the commonality between all of these talks was the amygdala. So I'm not a scientist, so I apologize to those in the room who are. So I use very, actually there's a book out now protesting all of the neuroscience research on meditation. It's called Brain Porn. So, and the person really hates all this research. But anyway, I love it. And I've not read that book, so. Back to the research says I understand it. So, the best way that I've been able to understand it is that the amygdala, which is back here, is our lizard brain. So this is our survival brain. This is the one that helps us when you do split-second things, like to save someone or to take care of something or you have an emergency and you wonder how did that happen, it's your amygdala. Okay, there's other things going on as well. But this is our primitive brain. Okay? So when we were primitive, it worked pretty well, right? And certainly, as I've told some of you in other venues, if you see something on the path that looks like a snake, you shouldn't hang around to see, is it a stick, is it a snake, or go up and touch it and then be bit and die. No. You should obey your amygdala, get out of there, right? Okay? Don't spend time thinking, what is this, and then, be killed. So lizard brain is very useful, and in fact necessary. But the problem, and this is actually in a book that a student in Dunn recommended to me, I can't remember his name, anyway, the Buddha's brain. So The problem is that the amygdala still dominates us, but we don't need it in that way anymore. And we're surrounded by difference and things we don't understand all the time. And so we're fired constantly, right? Okay? Well, it turns out, at least preliminary research, and this is all from these amazing books by James Austin, a scientist and a medical doctor, who has written like 5 enormously fat books on Zen and the brain. Really incredible. He's in his 80s, and he just came out with another article, another book. I mean, the man is, Mary Douglas used to be my hero. I think maybe James Austin is now. But anyway, Mary Douglas is a structural anthropologist who wrote into her 90s. So, deep breathing and preliminary research bypasses the amygdala. So maybe your grandmother or your mom was like, when you get angry, take 20 deep breaths before you respond. Well, your grandma was doing brain research. She already knew before the neuroscientists. Okay. And in addition to that, you're creating new neural pathways. So there's more and more research on this. It's very preliminary. All of this is very complex, but it's there. But what does this mean? What good is this to us? A picture of a brain. Well, great. Now we know, or I know, I have a lizard brain. It can control me, and my meditation helps me bypass my lizard brain. But what actual use is that on the ground? So, I think some of you have heard the story. Bear with me. Some years ago, I was at an event that I didn't want to be at. I didn't want to be there. I'm trying to be neutral, so if it sounds confusing, it's because I'm trying not to specify anything. And I was going to be with a group of people for 10 days. I didn't want to be there. I felt trapped, but I felt obligated. And so I thought I'm going to do my best, but I was very worried. So my Zen teacher told me, treat it like a retreat. You're going to be in this situation for 10 days. Pretend like you're on a retreat. So you follow the schedule and you follow your breath. So just what we did just now together, I did all day long. I followed my breath when I was talking. I'm following it now. I followed it when I was walking. I followed it while I was listening. I followed it while we took lots of tours and did all the stuff together. So I followed my breath, and I followed my breath, and I followed my breath, which was hard to do. So I was in line to get food, and I was following my breath, and there had just been an upsetting situation, so I was really following my breath. And it was very crowded. And this gentleman started walking towards me, and I thought, he's going to cut. And I've been in line for a long time. And he was looking at me. I could tell that he knew that I knew he was going to cut. And he was excited about it, and he wanted to do it, right? So he's coming towards me, and he's looking at me like, so that was already very annoying. So I'm following my breath, and I'm enjoying having plans like, I'm not going to let him in line, I'm going to tell him he's rude, I'm going to talk to people behind me and say, look at this rude guy, blah, blah, right? Following my breath, he's coming closer. And I'm following my breath, he gets next to me, and I am not lying. I move back, and I let him in, and it just goes away. This was weird, because I had an alternate plan. That must have been the prefrontal cortex. I don't know, but not maybe a big one. But so I did not plan to let him in. I did not plan to be nice to him. My body did it. And what I offer to you then is that the breath-based reality did it. This happened despite me. I did not. No, I wanted to be rude to that man. So maybe an odd story, maybe kind of silly, but at least the neuroscience research that I've been looking through for this article seems to imply that these new neural pathways then kind of take over and you go a different direction. You go a different direction. So this has happened now so many times that, and I'm no scientist, so I can't prove it myself, that I now offer it to you anecdotally. So in part what this means, I think, is that there needs to be the transformation of suffering, especially suffering that's hard to change or is a pattern. You know, like I'm very reactive, controlling, manipulative. Well, I've gotten better at those things, but still, that's not suffering. And so, following the breath allowed me to do something different. In fact, it made me, in that case, it made me do something different. I was not interested in being nice to him, but it happened. And so that experience and many more that happened during that 10-day event led me then to think of the social justice of the present moment, the social justice of right now, and the way in which spiritual practice, regardless of what type it is, can transform suffering. If something else happens, brain research is now starting to kind of try to fill that in, but something else happens. So what I'd like to ask you to do now on your card, that you're going to, this is for you, you know, you can keep it for yourself, is if you would write down some pattern that you'd like to change. So thinking about, you know, what you want to be on your deathbed. So think about something that you would like to change, some pattern that you have trouble with, anger, impatience, jealousy, denial. That's a big one for me. Just think of some habit or pattern that you would like to change. So just think about that for a moment. And obviously you're going to keep these for yourself. So, I think it's the next one. Yes, that's it. So this is my recipe for the one that I offer to you. I'm going to talk about a few more strategies for becoming the presence that transforms suffering. You know, I'm not yet one myself, so this is obviously provisional, but the transformations that have occurred, and even I remember someone on this 10-day event looked at me and said, "You're really different." It was so that other people could tell. It was really interesting and gratifying, I have to say. In part, we've been talking a lot about number 3, make peace within yourself so that you can offer it to others. And with our breath-based practice, we've been already beginning to touch on number 5, some type of spiritual practice you can cultivate the internal circumstances that allow you to not depend on external circumstances. So students who've taken meditation classes with me will know that we talk a lot about serenity, happiness that does not depend on external circumstances. So now I want to move to another part of another possible tool for your toolkit for becoming a presence that transforms suffering. So imagine what it would be like not to worry about what other people think of you. Imagine never having that concern again. What is my Facebook status? Will she go out with me? Will he buy me a Valentine's Day present? Will my mother approve of my career? Will my father be happy with my promotion? Will my partner like my new haircut. I've been through that one. So imagine, right? I don't know about you, but wouldn't that be such a relief? Never to have that worry again. Never. Okay? So the premise here is that a lot of our suffering arises because of how we want to look in front of others, be in front of others, and be perceived by others. And then, of course, the flip side, that we are social creatures. We need each other, and much of our greatest happiness is in relationship. And so there's that tension, right? That painful, potentially, tension. So I want to move to number 1 and 2, unconditional love and fearlessness of the gift of non-fear. Because the ability to not worry about what others think of us is the gift of non-fear. Certainly it has other contexts as well, but that's the one I'm targeting right now. So, there's a lot I could say in relationship to Zen in terms of 1 and 2, but I want to turn now to some of the teachings in Catholic mysticism that some of you are familiar with from my class, in terms of the gift of non-fear and unconditional love. So, part of any spiritual practice, and in particular the ones that I teach, so centering prayer, Catholic mysticism, and Zen, part of it is about getting knocked out of concepts into direct experience. What is happening right now? Okay? And not being imprisoned by our mind. So, often when we sit still, or even when we're maybe trying to go to sleep, the tape starts running. I forgot to do that. Oh, so-and-so said that to me. I should have said that. Oh, I saw my ex today. What type of revenge will I plan? The tape starts running, right? Or someone has been a jerk to you, and they're trying to reconcile, but you can't get out of that they're a jerk, right? This is hard. Okay? So, just as breath-based reality can be a larger reference point that can help transform suffering that might occur, so like with me and the man in line, that kind of mundane example, but what for me was huge, realizing, social justice happens in the present moment. Even this little tiny act, I'm contributing to change. Okay? In terms of Catholic mysticism, the reason one can have serenity is because you feel loved. So feeling unconditionally loved erases those worries. And many of the mystics write about this. So, my students who are in here, who were in that class, will remember we would often talk about the way in which, when a person feels loved, it's easier to be good. So I wanted to read a quote from, actually I'll just do it from memory at this point, I think, from Houston Smith's The World Religions books. So some of you might have encountered it maybe in high school or maybe in a class here. Very famous text. And in his description of Christianity, he described Christ as someone around whom it was impossible to be unhappy. You could not be unhappy when you were in Christ's presence. And I think many people would say that for other world religious figures, Muhammad, the Buddha, etc. So you could only be happy in the presence of Christ. In fact, Skilobex, a Dominican theologian, says it was existentially impossible not to be happy around Christ. So imagine what that would be like. In my craving, I want to be a person like that, right? But it's impossible not to be happy around someone whose presence transforms suffering. So, I used to use that book in another class that I don't teach anymore, comparative mysticism. And at the time, my Zen teacher had just gotten diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So this was, let's see, she died 3 years ago, so that was 7 years ago. And at the time, it was a killer, like pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is still a killer, basically. If you get it, you're not going to survive very long. And so she was like a mother to me, a second mother to me, had really saved me. And I mean, I have wonderful parents, but often it's not just our parents who can help us. And we were all freaking out, all of our students. And I was reading this passage about Christ, and that what attracted people to the early Christians was their joy and how happy they were. So I'm not trying to convert you. Houston Smith himself speaks in glowing terms about all world religions, so he's just talking about this one dynamic. Okay? And as I read it, I felt that love. I felt flooded with God's love for me. So I rarely tell this story because it's obviously very personal. But the reason I tell it is that I have been struggling with some of the own ways that I create suffering. So manipulating others, controlling others, wanting the good opinion of others, people pleasing, basically. And when I felt that, I had two thoughts. One was, this is what's going to happen when Darlene dies. She will be with that kind of love. So it's going to be okay. So that's what occurred to me. And then the second thing that occurred to me at that time is I realized that many of my unwholesome habits and my ways of creating my own suffering had been driven because I did not have the capacity to receive love. So this is the other piece. We can go through the motions. We can be good. Many times I have made the right choice. My heart was not there. You know, with that man cutting in line, the amazing thing was that my heart shifted, even though I initially didn't want to be nice to him. Right? And that love is what spiritual practice brings in any tradition. I'm giving you an example from Catholicism and from Christianity, but in Zen as well. In fact, most of this language comes from Zen. Thich Nhat Hanh, a famous Vietnamese Zen master, says that a bodhisattva, so a compassionate being whose vow is to transform suffering, gives the gift of non-fear. So that is a person whose presence transforms suffering, that gift of non-fear. So to begin to wrap up, I'll provide a sort of a Zen equivalent of this experience of love and my own personal realization that it is only love that changes people. Punishment doesn't change people and get them to be good. Self-improvement summons the shadow. It does the exact opposite, right? It's only love. And why? Because it erases categories. It frees you from the prison of your mind. So, in Zen, there's a concept of emptiness. Emptiness is a misleading term. It really means fullness, that nothing has an independent existence. Everything is connected. And the idea is that when the practitioner experiences this, all your suffering will cease. The filter, many of you know about my filter thing, right? We see the world like this. Spiritual practice helps us go like this. But when we're worried or fearful or upset, it goes flat. Okay? All right? Okay? And then you try to pull it back out. So, Suzuki Roshi, the founder of San Francisco Zen Center, in trying to explain to his students emptiness and get them to feel it warmly instead of, to me, emptiness. It's like, I don't want that. Oh, what's that, right? Instead, he said emptiness is like the experience of a mother's love that will always care for you. Always care for you. And so, breath-based reality can give the gift of non-fear and unconditional love, because basically, you'll have to trust me on this, we're running out of time, it leads to an unconditional existence. So to become a presence that transforms suffering, you have to find a way to free yourself from your conditions. So, for example, I'm Latina. I'll be 48 later this month. I'm from South Texas. I'm Catholic. I sit Zazen. I'm married. I speak several languages. I have a PhD. Anyway, on and on and on. Those are my conditions. I have different types of chronic illness things. These are my conditions. But spiritual practice enables us to do this with our worldviews so that we transform our suffering. We can transform our suffering. So, let's see, if I have one last thing to say. 5 to 7. So the last thing, maybe since we're running out of time, is to consider now, in light of perhaps what you wrote down at the beginning, I vow to, I'm thinking backwards. I do that a lot. What do you want to be on your deathbed? So maybe if you pull out your card, okay, and think about coming up with a personal vow. So one of the vows I made at a certain point in my practice when I was struggling with being a people pleaser and all the consequences of that. Like being angry when I couldn't please people, or sacrificing too much of myself so that people would like me, and so on. A pivotal vow for me, a personal one, was I vow to renounce the good opinion of others. So some of you have heard this from me before. And that has become very useful to me. When I feel myself beginning to create my own suffering, the vow comes up. I vow to renounce the good opinion of others. Another vow that I still use that helps me is I vow to be present to others, whether I like it or not. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the presence of someone who actually I hate. But I follow my breath when I'm with them, and I actually once had someone tell me, I feel really loved by you. You are so kind. And I thought, wow, I hate this person. But it didn't matter, because I followed my breath and I kept discarding my opinion of them and just trying to listen, be present. They felt loved. How liberating is that? It didn't matter if I liked or disliked them. To be present to another is to love them. So that's another vow of mine. I vow to be present to others, whether I like them or not. So what might your vow be? What vow might you carry forth today, linked to thinking about what kind of heart do you want to have when you die? What kind of soul do you want to have when you die? What gift do you want to leave to others? Thank you.